I had a hobby too. Mine happened to be guns and ballistics, and I studied guns and ballistics as much as I could, and I wrote an article about high velocity.
So out of all my years working at Weatherby, the last 5 have been some of the most exciting. Working with Adam, with him running the company.
And to think that I get the opportunity of carrying on my grandfather's legacy 75 years later here in Sheridan, Wyoming, I mean, it really is a dream come true.
Oh, I'm home. Thank God I'm home.
On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast.
All right, welcome to On Our Mark, the Weatherby Podcast. We have a couple familiar faces with us today and a new one. So to my left, I've got Tyler Great Hen.
The Great Hen.
The Great Hen.
We have not gotten through a podcast yet.
You guys have not gone through a podcast where you haven't said that.
I'm going to have to do it every time now. It's just part of it.
Yup.
And across the table, I've got Mac, our content, photo, video guru.
Howdy.
I think we should change your title to guru.
I'm okay with guru.
I like that better.
Oh, I mean, yeah. Is it a
That
promotion?
sounds trendy.
No, definitely not.
Sideways.
I feel like guru is a promotion.
It's like a lateral move.
Oh.
It's a lateral move.
It's all about the title.
Producer is on the same level as guru, I feel like.
Yeah. And then across the table, again, to my right across the table, we have Seth Hiller, the one and only Seth Hiller, who is our controller turned product manager that is a big fan of what we're going to be talking today. Seth, welcome to the podcast.
Howdy, howdy.
What are we talking about today?
We're talking about some of the big boy rounds here. We got the Weatherby 3378 today.
Storied history on the 3378.
Yeah, it's actually pretty interesting. We were just, before this, we were talking about all of the possibilities that Roy had on caliber development, and this one coming in at 1959.
Developed
in
then. 1959 and released commercially in 96.
96.
It's like me getting around to my chores.
Yeah, I think I got dishes in my sink from 1959.
But there was kind of a cool reason why it didn't get, released right away, right?
Well, why did it start, Mac? I think you probably have the best history on this because of Mac's time doing our 75th anniversary video and book. He has kind of become our modern day historian.
It was fun. It was fun to learn all that stuff. But one of the cool things about, like these guys were saying, is the 3378 Weatherby Mag started out as an actual experimental military sniper round. The military was apparently contracting ammunition manufacturers to develop them what was going to be their standardized sniper round. You got to understand, back in the day, optics weren't what they were today. So that's kind of part of why Roy got his start, is his cartridges shot flat. So you could zero that cartridge at 200-300 yards and know, without all the dials and fancy gizmos we have going on today in scopes, that you could just hold a couple inches over that animal at 500 and it's going to die because that's shooting flat.
Shoot a laser beam. Yep.
So the military wanted armor-piercing rounds, and they had a goal of breaking 6,000 feet per second. And we've actually done a couple posts about this on the internet and stuff like that, and a lot of people think we have a typo because we talk about he used a 30-grain bullet that was specifically designed. And everybody's like, you meant 30 cal, right? It's like, no, he was... If you've seen a 378 Weatherby case, and then you imagine a 30-grain bullet in it, it's kind of like that the Irgensplit and Loudenboomer. It's a 22. This is real. Ackley apparently did it. A 22 neck down with a 378 Weatherby case.
Yes.
So pretty much probably that is what Roy was shooting out of this absolute fireball, but it never ended up happening. And
the target was 6,000.
6,000
and
FPS.
he could never get over 5. I think I got close to 5.
He got close, but a lot of people have speculated with today's slower burning powders. Is that possible? Should you try it at home?
No, not endorsed. Not officially
Not
endorsed
recommended.
here.
Yeah, not recommended.
Yeah, don't use tight group for that.
But that was kind of the start, and it just got shelved and didn't reappear until 1996 when Ed was head of the company and released it along with the AccuMarks, which came out at the same time.
Yep, we needed that number 3 contour barrel to fit this bigger case, and it's 378 neck down to 30 cal. So it's still today, even though it came out in 96, is the fastest production 30 cal period.
And what are some of those competitors, Seth, that we've got?
Well, some of the newer ones, we've got like the 300 PRC. That's kind of came onto the scene a little bit later. 30 Nozzlers in the same category. You got the 300 Norma, the 300 Rum. Then you start edging down to like the 300 Win Mag, and the old classic 300 Weatherby from 1943. So those are kind of the ones that people think of when they think of like a faster, flatter shooting 30 cal. But the 3378 is about 200 plus feet per second faster than any of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's the closest thing that we have in a 30 cal to a laser beam. I like to consider the 257. I often call it the 257 laser beam. But the 3378 is, if you're looking for speed, and I think it's important to note that it's not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you're just hunting whitetail at close range, obviously this doesn't make sense. There's a lot of bullets that we probably load that aren't going to hold up well, if you shoot something at very near range.
40 yards.
Correct. It's not what the cartridge was designed for. This is designed for taking animals ethically at long distance.
Yeah, the energy out to 400, some of those numbers, and that's pretty cool. So
Yeah, it's got the same energy at 200 yards that 300 Win Mag has at the muzzle.
yeah.
With a 180 grain bullet. And we load a 200 currently, I think is the heaviest that we load in-house. But there are other people, wildcatters out there doing a couple things. And just the energies that you can take advantage of with a heavier bullet with that much powder is impressive. You start to look at check out some of the hand loads, and guys are loading a 225 or a 230 or something in it, and that number, that energy number, it starts to look like, instead of 200 and 0, it's like muzzle and 400. It's insane.
Yeah.
What it can do.
Yeah, it's got a lot of juice. So I think we've been dancing around the actual velocities, but 3420 with 180 grain bullet, that's moving.
Smoking.
Turns out that's fast.
Yeah. Another thing that's interesting to note is the case capacity. I mentally, just from growing up, I think 100 grains of powder is a lot of powder. Like, you eclipse 100 grains of powder, crazy stuff can happen. We're working with 133 grains of case capacity for powder. There is a law of diminishing returns.
Yes.
Right? So we're versus a 300 Weatherby that's right at 100 grains of case capacity. I can't remember exactly, but
It's like 98.
yeah, so let's just call it 100. We're using 30% more powder, and we're only getting 10%-ish more velocity.
Yeah.
So
Only.
Only, yeah.
Only.
Do what you got to do to be the king.
well, yeah. And one of the things that people often talk about with Weatherby is barrel life, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a barrel burner. Is it a barrel burner? Maybe.
Perhaps.
I haven't shot one out yet.
Yeah, usually you're not going full auto on a 3378, so that kind of extends your life a little bit there.
I think the use is important. We just got back from Dallas Safari Club and Wild Sheep Foundation show, and people always ask the question about any of our cartridges. Well, is it going to burn the barrel out? I'm like, well, it depends on what you're going to do with it. If you're just looking to go to the range and shoot a bunch of steel, don't get this. Don't really get any of our cartridges. That's not what they're for.
Yeah.
But if you want to get dialed and then put your gun away and then go on a hunt and make sure that you're going to drop game as easily and ethically as possible, that's what this is for.
Yeah, a lot of the Weatherby cartridges have that purpose built and mentality anyways. There's a reason why behind everyone. We're not just coming out with that. So it's pretty purpose built.
And I feel like the barrel burner stigma, we hear it, we get questions at shows and stuff like that, but I could count on one hand, maybe two maximum, the amount of calls we get every year where it's like an RMA and they're like, yeah, I need to send my barrel back in. I shot it out. I think people read an internet article and they're like, I heard they do this. It's like, yeah, but do you know anybody who ever has?
I think realistically, you're still going to be near 1,000 shots. It might be a little more depending on if you went rapid fire a couple times or.
Yeah,
but
some of the maintenance in between. I mean, as far as cleaning and soaking and all the things that you can do that will really help you kind of maintain that barrel is going to really dictate just how far it's going to go.
So yeah, 800 to 1,000 on 3378, I think is a pretty safe guesstimate. That's a whole lot of not cheap boxes of ammo or a whole lot of
A
reloading.
lot of custom ones there.
We've all talked to a lot of people. How many people have you ever talked to that have burned out a 3378?
I haven't talked to anybody.
I have not met this person
Precisely.
yet.
But Luke, you were talking uses and purpose built and stuff like that, and you kind of touched on it earlier. So this is not for the guy who's going to go shoot a whitetail out of his tree stand at 40 yards. He can do it. He totally can.
Oh, even on the best bullets. I mean,
But like, what are animals are we thinking? You know, and like scenarios kind of stuff. Like, you know, this was a purpose built cartridge.
I think one of the reasons that we wanted to have Seth in here on this is because I'm going to vary from your question a little bit, but we have to talk about Seth's history a little here.
Yes.
It's actually the only one in here that's a real Wyoming resident from here.
True story. Yeah.
I think it's important to note that Seth showed up to his interview for Weatherby with a black eye.
That happens. Things happen.
Yeah, he's like a real Wyoming, not necessarily a cowboy, but he's a real Wyoming cowboy.
Not for like his blue collar, like financial controller. He showed up with a black eye and blue face.
Yeah, but I think that's cool. And then while he was our controller, he was taking off a couple weeks a year so that he could go guide people up here in the Bighorns for elk and deer.
Correct. Yep. That happens.
And still does that.
Yeah. Haven't given that one up yet. Not old enough.
which I think is pretty cool. But it also gives them a unique background that I think you talk to a lot of guides. You get people that you don't know showing up to hunt with you, and that gives you a unique perspective on what their mentality is.
Absolutely. That's, you know, you meet people from all over the country when you do that type of work. And so they come out west. A lot of them are, you know, Easterners, quite frankly. And so they come out here and they can't believe how much space there is and how far something actually is when it looks like it's pretty close. So they'll come out here and they're like, man, I've never shot anything past 150 yards. And it's like, well, strap in because we might be going a little longer range than that. Let's go out here and, you know, check out your rifle. Let's see what it's doing. And they look at you like you're Quigley Down Under when you go ahead and smack some steel at like 1,000 yards. And they're like, I've never seen anything like this before. And it's like, well, this is kind of how we have to practice, because then if something's out there at 400 or 500 yards, 600 yards, it feels like a chip shot. So
and there's situations hunting in the mountains where you're going to be on the side of one mountain shooting across to the side of another mountain, and I think that's where this cartridge excels. Is you're sending a relatively heavy projectile across the canyon because you want something that's going to cut through the wind well. Mm-hmm. You can factor for drop, but you don't know what's happening. You can have 5 kestrels, doesn't matter. You can't measure the wind in the middle. Mm-hmm. Speed helps with that.
Absolutely, yeah. The 3378 for a cross canyon shooter is about as good as you can get. I'd argue maybe the 338, 378 might be slightly better, but that's a conversation topic for a different day. For a 30 cal, yeah, it's really hard to beat. I tell you that its terminal performance is as good as anything you'll ever see. So things don't get away when they get struck with a 3378.
Have you seen or had some examples of hunters that have come in with? Well, I know you've carried a 3378 as your guide gun the last few years.
Yep.
And then you've got some stories. I'm just going to leave it there. Let's hear a story, Seth.
Let's see here. Yeah, people come in and heck, even just this year, you get up there, it gets slick a little bit with some snow, with some mud, and you know, I carry along a backup rifle just in case something happens. And this last year was one where something happened. Hunter dipped his muzzle right down into some mud, and so obviously I'm not carrying a cleaning kit with me when I'm up there because I'm already trying to, you know, shed a few pounds off the middle. I don't need to carry any extra weights. So he went ahead and used my 3378 and ended up flattening a whitetail at 360 yards. I hadn't seen anything like what that one did. So when we talk about don't shoot one at 40 yards, you know, 300 yards is probably about where you want to be on that one, maybe a little farther, because it will flat put them on the ground.
Perhaps some meat loss potentially on that one.
You know, it was a really good shot. Gun shot really well, so it was not as bad as what you would think. But you also don't want to maybe shoot one on bone or anything like that at that kind of range.
Yeah, I think it's important. We've talked about it quite a bit on different bullet constructions, but you gotta keep in mind that there's a low end velocity where bullets aren't really going to perform where you want them to. We think that's around 1,800 feet per second. And then there's also a high end, and that can vary by bullet. And so obviously you probably don't want to shoot some things right at the muzzle or, within a few feet of the muzzle, because I think you're probably going to pencil through with most bullets. There's probably some that might be able to handle that, but each hunter is going to need to do the testing on their own. But I think you need to get to a reasonable distance before you're going to see optimal bullet performance. And I think that's important to note on any cartridge, but especially on 3378.
And we learned that 27 yards is the optimal distance for a white-tailed deer with a 6.5 Creedmoor.
It is,
That's
because
it's built to perform. It's right in the wheelhouse, baby.
It's a hammer at that range. It's perfect.
I may have shot my first whitetail, first anything with a 6.5 Needmore, and
Needmore.
I was really like mentally getting geared up for a longer shot, and it ended up being 27 yards.
I couldn't believe it, though. That bullet didn't pencil. Huh. It was like...
Well, because that was the same as 6.5 300 at like 400 yards.
I know.
Yeah.
The terminal range of a 6.5 Creedmoor is 30 yards. But no, it is an awesome cartridge. Like, I've gotten to see, like, Seth's taking his gun out, his guide gun. I've gotten to see Adam go on several hunts with this, and it just hammers stuff. Like, and it's peace of mind. It's nice. Like, I talk about this with a rifle a lot. It's nice to have a rifle that I know shoots better than I ever can. I have a gun that shoots really good groups, and it's like I can trust that, knowing that this shoots better, this makes me a better shooter. And the nice thing about that cartridge is that's a cartridge you can trust, and it's like, okay, if I have to, normally we're always trying to take ethical shots. It all depends on the shooter and the situation. But if I know I'm going to have to reach out there and poke 600-700 yards on an animal, it's nice to know that no matter what, I've got the energy to do it. I don't have to be like, it's kind of at the...
Yeah, you have confidence in like what you're using. There's no doubt. Right?
Yeah, it's like, I'm like, not like, that's kind of at the edge of what's safe. It's like, no, at 600 or 700 yards, that's like 400 yards.
Yeah,
with
you
a
worked.
Win Mag.
You worked that hard to get there. You did all the shooting beforehand. You felt confident, and now you don't have to have that. Oh, is the math in my head? Can I make this shot?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think when I think of this cartridge, obviously I think of Weatherby, but when I think outside of what's just Weatherby, Mark Thompson comes to mind with Thompson
Shout
Long
out.
Range. Mark and Scott both. Adam's been able to hunt with Scott a little bit. I've done one of their shooting schools, and he really just lays out the why really well of why speed matters. And it's that cross canyon shooting. It takes out other variables, minimizes other variables, that if you range the rock beyond or the stick in front of what you think, you're probably not going to miss that by 100 yards, but you might miss it by 40. And so it gives you the ability to have a little more forgiveness in what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I mean, Mark's taken it to the extreme where he only loads one bullet, designed a reticle specifically for that bullet, and basically however many years, I wish I knew the years off the top of my head, but he just sighted a gun in at 100 yards and then built like a plywood tower and then just backed up, aimed at the top, and then literally just measured the drops. Like before BDC reticles were a thing, he just factored in all the way out to 1,000, and he knew exactly where his drops were for each of those distances.
So cool. that is
talk about a forward thinker.
Yeah, before time there. That's awesome.
And there was no relationship to Weatherby at that time, but he just honed in on 3378 Weatherby is what I want to do because I want to shoot mule deer and elk across a canyon.
And that's all those guys do. Also run a shooting school, so they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and a couple other businesses.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
And they kill big stuff, and a lot of it. So, like...
Yeah, just look them up.
Turns out they know what they're doing, yeah.
Yeah, so for years, he's exclusively loaded 378s in a Mark V AccuMark.
Do you know the bullet? You said he had a specific bullet.
He uses the 180 grain AccuBun.
Okay.
Gotcha. So that's what his recipe is built around. And he chose that bullet specifically because he felt that, he calls it the velocity band, that it had the widest velocity band from the low end of performance to the high end. I think now there's other really good premium bonded bullets out there like a Sirocco, but I think at the time that was one of the few. And when he started, and it makes sense. That's a great bullet for sure.
Luke, have you gotten to do any shooting with this caliber?
I have actually not killed anything with a 3378. I have played with it at the range quite a bit, but I've not shot a game animal yet. Yet.
That's key.
I'll have to solve
That's
that
on
this
the
year.
list.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea. Once you go that way, it's kind of hard to go backwards. But if you're not recoil sensitive, 'cause
No,
it does have a little more recoil than your standard 223.
I'm not afraid of recoil. I think, I'm partial to the 300 Weatherby personally, just because I'm probably not going to take a 1,200 yard shot.
Yeah.
But
It's a purpose-built
It is.
cartridge,
It
like we
is.
were talking about. We have a guy, a coworker of ours, our web guy, and he was debating between a 3378 and a 300 Weatherby. And I asked him, I said, Chris, what is the farthest you would ever shoot an animal in perfect conditions? And I think he said 600 or 700 yards. I was like, buy 300 Weatherby.
yeah,
It's a purpose-built cartridge. For the guys that need something like that, there's nothing else commercial like it.
Sometimes it's not necessarily need. Maybe it's maybe you just want it.
you're right. I think that's it. So I think I'm going to commit right now to I'm going to shoot something with this fall.
You heard it right here, ladies and
It's gonna
gentlemen.
happen.
Mark it down.
Yeah.
I know a guy that might have a pretty good gun.
Oh yeah. I know a guy too. I'm gonna
You
call
know
him.
some guy.
I'm gonna call him. Seth, have you personally shot anything with 3378?
On my wall, I've only gotten a mule deer with a 3378. And it was actually one of those instances when you sit and plan for the long shot that you think you're going to have to take across a canyon. And then the unsuspecting muley showed up at about 168 yards. And it turns out it'll flatten one at 168 yards as good as it does at 868 yards. But that's the one that I got with the 3378 for my personal one.
You were ready, though. You were ready.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I could have backed up for a while, but it turns out that just would have been not a good idea. So
I've got a friend that actually just came back from a hunt with. His name's Bob. Shout out to Bob. And Bob wanted a rifle that he just wanted one gun. He's like, I want to shoot anything. I went on a moose hunt with Bob. He killed his moose, and he has since killed pretty much everything that there is. He wanted it simple. He's like, I want a gun set up. We put a VX5 HD on there with a CDS dial, and like we gave him 2 dials for altitudes, and he just puts the dial that's appropriate on there and spins to the yardage. And he hasn't had to touch that thing. And he was going through the list of things: moose, couple elk, mule deer, killed an aoudad, couple aoudad, couple mouflon, javelina, white-tailed deer, like all various distances. And he goes, I call this gun Boom Flop because
Boom flop.
I've yet to have anything take a step.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty neat. It's
I
like,
think it's got to be mean on a javelina. They're not very big.
Yeah, but I was actually really surprised in Texas at the aoudad and mouflon are one. I had never killed one before, or really spent any time with them. The aoudad were bigger than I had in my head, and the mouflon were smaller. Both were tougher than I thought. And they're goats, sheep, whatever. I put 2 pretty darn near perfect shots on at with 6.5 RPM, and they both probably went like 30 yards. And I feel like if that had been a deer, they would have just, or an antelope, they would have just
light
died.
switch,
just lights out. And they just, like I said, they ran off a little bit. And in hilly mountainous country, I'm like, what just happened? And you go out of sight, and I'm like, I'm not used to this.
that's not a good feeling. That's
But the 3378 did not do that. It was a boom flop. So that's the difference. So I think that's another important thing that we were talking about in Texas this weekend was sheep and goat hunters especially. You're hunting country where you want to freaking drop them
You
in
want to
their
anchor
tracks.
it right there.
You want to
'cause
exactly.
Otherwise, they
that's
could
the
fall
word.
a couple thousand feet.
Yeah,
Right?
and the difference in like a mountain goat where if you break off an inch of the horn, that happened to shout out to Ben Rogers, but
Shout out.
Was it Ben that broke? No, Adams broke off.
Broke.
Yeah.
Adam broke off.
Yeah, he's like glued it, or it pieced together perfectly. So
And
in
they
the
found
picture-
it, but they found it. Sometimes you don't find
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
But-
And sometimes it breaks more than just part of it off. Sometimes it's, oh, my goat has no horns.
Yeah, but I think that's where you might sometimes use a cartridge that is quote unquote too big for the species, but just based on size. But if you want to just anchor that thing in its tracks, that's where it's at.
I believe in overkill.
Yep, no doubt about that.
Rather overkill than underkill.
Absolutely.
That's right.
It's better to have a little too much gun than not quite enough.
Speaking of too much gun, so some comparable cartridges, we listed them off earlier, just for any of you tech spec nerds out there. These are all comparisons with a 180 grain bullet. The 300 Win Mag kind of on the lower end, 470 feet per second. The 3378 Weatherby is faster. It's 338 feet per second faster than the 300 Norma Bag, 280 feet per second faster than the 300 PRC, 170 faster than the 300 Rum, and 220 faster than the 30 Nosler. And the 300 Weatherby was actually the king until Weatherby dethroned it itself, and it's 170 feet per second faster. Or slow. The 300 Weatherby is 170 feet per second slower.
So basically 300 Weatherby and 300 Rum are both 170 feet per second slower than 3378 Weatherby. Still king of the...
And that one was developed in 43, so it took a long... The Rum didn't even come out till 99, and then there was the...
There really wasn't a lot of technology improvements in 65 years between the 40s and the late 90s. I don't know, was the internet around in the 40s?
That's like a dictatorship there when you're on that long.
Yeah, that's funny. I wonder how much that has to do with it, because across a lot of cartridges, there was very little cartridge development in that gap post World War.
I think a lot of stuff got simplified by the world. Like a lot of the old timers, they just hunted with their Garands and the 30-06 and whatnot. That's worked because that's what it worked in the war. Why wouldn't it work on a deer? It's kind of their philosophy. And we were even talking before the podcast about it'd be very interesting to. Roy had experimental cartridges. He's a wildcatter. I mean, there's some weird stuff out there. Even just everyday people are making wildcats. It would be interesting to see some of the cartridge skeletons in Roy's closet. They'd be
the 65300 was originally designed when
48.
Yeah,
48, and we launched it in like 16.
Yeah. We have a rifle downstairs in
That's
the
a
showroom.
big gap.
That's a long
If you're in
time.
Sheridan, come and check it out. It's in the showroom. It's a rifle chambered in it from like 1948 in our vault little setting back down there. So
we're gonna land this plane, but I don't know if John Baumgartner, our ballistician, listens to this podcast or not, and I don't want you guys to tell him anything, but I know he's working on a couple of things. I'm just curious what he's going to come out with, and what are people going to be talking about in 2110. I
don't know, but it's probably going to have a hammer bullet.
If it's John,
Yeah,
that's right.
Definitely a hammer fan there.
I'm still not convinced he's not on the payroll.
Like, there's got to be a little commission there.
There's
gotta be
some
something.
kickbacks. Every
just
meeting
giving
we
them
go
free
to.
bullets. Just like here,
Yeah,
load these.
here you
You're
go.
okay.
Here you go.
The answer, if you haven't listened to our Hammer Bullet podcast, but John, our ballistician, like the answer to everything is always the hammer bullets, because they like every powder, they like every barrel, they like everything. They perform better than anything. The only thing they're not good at is making big splashes on steel. That's the only downside.
They make a really sweet bullet trail, though, when you have videos of them.
They do. Even
Yes.
without videos. Naked eye is one of the
Or
best
naked
bullet trails you
that
can
also
see.
works. It's a vapor
pretty good.
trail.
It's freaking cool.
All right, well that's a 3378 Weatherby Mag, our favorite fast 30 cal.
Super fast.
Let us know if you want to learn about any more cartridges.
Yeah, I think this might be more of a theme. Let's keep that a little consistent on this. So
What should we do next?
I don't know.
Well, maybe the audience should decide.
That's a good. What is our email where people can email
You
us?
can email on our mark
Yeah.
at
Weatherby.com.
weatherby.com.
Yeah.
If you want to.
Send us in which deep dive you guys would like to see.